Hello, adventurers! Hail and well met. Welcome to episode 35. First, a short intro. I started what I thought was going to be a crafting channel with stories, but it's evolving into a story channel with crafting. I'm kind of the Swiss Army knife of entertainment. I combine writing, storyboards, model building, and some 3D modeling. I'm adding storyboards over the crafting and narration to give the listener an idea of the images in my imagination. And I do apologize for this taking so long. I don't know if you've ever arrived at the end of a project and then you go, hey, what's that? And when you pull on it, the whole thing unravels. This story has gone through several rewrites. I hope the effort was worth it. Part of the challenge of writing a continuing story is maintaining consistency. But the story doesn't come to me all at once. What started as 3 projects grew into some world-building lore that sets the stage for more adventures. Which brings the questions, what is all this project building and story writing for anyway? It's a playground for adventure. So with that in mind, let's begin. Welcome to the World of Theia. We open with a recap of the last chapter of the story. Many years ago, strange merchants from across the sea brought a substance rich in magical energy to Stormkill. They called it Mordantium. The mages of Stormkill soon became reliant on it to power their magic and create magnificent structures. When the Mordantium merchants had a falling out with the mages and ceased trade, a crisis unfolded. To prevent the collapse of the city, Samaxius the Great embarked on a quest to find the source of Mordantium. He discovered that the merchants were not from Theia, but from another realm known as the Ether. He secretly built a ship to sail into the Ether. He was never heard from again. His disappearance was the greatest unsolved mystery in Stormkill. 50 years later, it is his great-granddaughter, Sam, who uncovers his fate. Now, grab a drink, hot or cold, sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story. Prologue. In his rush to leave the confines of Theia and explore the unknown, Samaxius the Great made a few miscalculations in the construction of his portal. It was no easy task to build something as intricate as a magic portal to another dimension, much less one big enough to sail a ship through. He also had the additional challenge of outfitting a ship to sail into an unfamiliar realm. His ambition to be the first mage of Stormkill to enter the Ether overcame his usual caution. The consequences were dire. Samaxius's beacon had worked. It opened the rift between worlds and the wandering star sailed through. A moment later, the beacon collapsed, its power expended. With no way to recharge the beacon, his ship and crew were stranded on the other side, and because of his secrecy, no one would be coming to their rescue. Morale was not good. To make matters worse, the portal was now tattered and unstable, like a ripped curtain billowing through a broken window in a storm. Unstable portals to other realms can be dangerous things. The Ether began bleeding into Theia, causing unpredictable weather that became more violent over time. Chapter 1. The Book of Sam. I hated being this high up in the Blighthouse during storms. The tower my great-grandfather built was sturdy, even by mage standards. It was a column of solid stone perched on an ocean-facing cliff and rose 260 feet. I swear I could feel it sway, enough to make me queasy. I was afraid that the abandoned monument to his genius would topple into the sea and take me with it. He had shaped the tower from the surrounding rock, using powerful spells no one else knew. His notes described his method of liquefying stone and then forming the tower from an image in his mind. The liquid stone bent to his will and obeyed his thoughts. The mental discipline it took was evident in every intricate line of the tower. A structure like this would have taken several mages working together months to complete. If the legend is true, he built it alone in 3 days. I suspected Mordantium was involved. Even though the tower was only meant to house the ether lens and a magician's workshop, he still made the effort to make it pleasing to the eye. Beneath the lantern room was his workshop. When I discovered it, I understood why he guarded it all so viciously. It was a treasure hoard of magical knowledge and research. Stacked from floor to ceiling, journals and notebooks were filled with his findings. Arcane calligraphy was one of my favorite subjects, but it didn't prepare me for the hundreds of configurations that he devised and recorded into his books. I began looking for something that might help restore power to the portal. My first and only successful attempt to activate the ether lens kept the portal open just long enough for me to catch a glimpse of something on the other side. I thought I saw a city or a massive ship. I wasn't exactly sure, but before I could make out anything distinct, the portal collapsed into a cloud of swirling incandescent colors, and the image disappeared. I went through all of his books and journals again to see if he had made any mention of that vision, but there was nothing. It led me to believe he and his crew had made it through in the first try, but were never able to return after the beacon failed. Keeping the beacon lit for those few moments depleted all of my power. It took days to recover my magic. It would take months, possibly years, for me to gather and hold enough power to channel it into the beacon and get it working. I needed help. But asking the noble circle was out of the question. They saw me as nothing more than a renegade who wasted all of her time on the frivolity of surfing, never treating the craft with the seriousness it deserved. They would just scoff and laugh me out of the Great Hall, or worse, they would try to stop me. If they became aware of the fact that I had removed the guards and wards from the tower, there would be no stopping the horde of looters that would descend on it like ants to a corpse. I wondered if there was any more dantium to be found in the city. The midnight market was reputed to have all sorts of hard-to-get things. If I could procure even a small amount of it, it would be enough to charge up the runes on the portal and keep it stable, possibly for days. If there was any in Stormkill, it was a carefully guarded secret. Unlike my grandfather, I'm not a library person. In the same way that waves and wind sharpen my surfing skills, a background hum of activity focuses my mind. I knew just the place I needed to go. The cozy atmosphere of Frogfoot's Tavern was an excellent place to sit, drink, and think. There were little alcoves and side rooms on the upstairs floor that were perfect for intense contemplation. The soft murmuring of evening patrons provided company that didn't need attention. Lumbrissa was there, seemingly an ordinary woman. I had seen her there a few times, listening to Frogfoot's tales of old Stormkill. It surprised me to see her actually drinking from a tankard and laughing. In that moment, no one would ever know that the rest of the time she was a 50-foot-tall fire-controlling elemental being that walked naked through the jungles and volcanoes of the island. She watched me as I walked past, looking me in the eye, her head turning to follow me as I went up the stairs. There are rumors that Lumbrissa has a dark past, but no one knows the details, or if they do, they won't speak of it. Spreading rumors about her is never a good idea. She knows about everything that happens on the island. The elemental beings are well known to the people of Stormkill, and are simply regarded as strange folk that live on the island. The legend says that they were here before all others, and will still be here when all else is gone. They are respected for the power they have and the roles they play on the land, but are generally left alone. I found my favorite spot tucked into a corner. I spread out my papers and notes and began working the problem of charging the array. Quiet as a cat, Lumbrissa had come up to my table and taken a seat. I almost spilled my drink over the books and papers when I looked up and saw her green eyes looking back at me. She raised her eyebrows at me, but didn't say anything. I didn't know what to do. I took a nervous sip from my tankard. She asked me about my surfing. Without being aware of it, I went on for almost 20 minutes before she cleared her throat. Then she asked me about the storms that come once or twice a week to pummel the island, and if I knew anything about it. I almost spit out my drink in surprise. "Why would I?" I said. "Your great-grandfather built the tower," she said. His carelessness ripped a hole in the air. The sky and water are being changed by what flows out of the wound he made. I explained that I thought I could fix it, but I needed help. When she asked why didn't I just seek the aid of the mages in the city, I stared into my drink and told her we don't get along. At that, she genuinely laughed and said, "It's because you spend too much time surfing, wave caller." I had heard people in town use that name for me, and I was never sure if they were being complimentary. But when Lumbrissa said it, it sounded like a regal title. She said, "I've watched you surfing the waves around Stormkill. You are so unlike the Tower mages. They never take the time to see the real magic of life. When you use your power to attune and call the waves, I feel you are a kindred spirit. I consider you a daughter of Theia. That would make you my sister. I think we can help each other," she said. "Samaxius is not here to answer for the disturbances to my island, and something needs to be done. I will help you, but if you fail, I will destroy this tower and be done with it." I felt a sudden tightness in my chest, and I could hear my heart racing, thundering in my ears. My head felt hot. Images of all of my great-grandfather's work disappearing in a column of fire filled my mind. She lifted her chin slightly and said, "The weather tomorrow morning will be good for surfing. Come see me when you are done. I want to show you something." I asked her if she really wanted me to go surfing tomorrow before coming to see her, and she replied, "Yes, the waves will give you strength." That night, I slept in the tower. I dreamt of traveling among the stars. Lumbrissa was right. The morning was clear skies and a warm breeze. The weather was perfect for surfing. When an elemental suggests that you surf, you surf. I suspected that she also had something to do with the beautiful weather, and I didn't want to waste the gift. After my communion with the waves, I dressed for my meeting. I picked out one of my finest tunics, a sky blue satin with gold thread embroidery at the cuffs and collar, and forest green trousers. I had unconsciously chosen colors that echoed the color of the island. I don't know that Lumbrissa cared how I dressed, but somehow it was important to me at this moment. A single book from Samaxius' shelf was all I brought with me. It was a large, heavy journal bound in wood and leather with brass hinges and clasps. It was filled with the sketches of geometric arrangements that channeled energy. I found Lumbrissa in full majesty on the outskirts of the city, sitting cross-legged under the shade of a tree that made her look small. Seated, she was still taller than a 2-story house. Looking me in the eye, she spoke first, her voice as cool and calm as the shade. "I hope you don't mind that I took my larger form. It makes it easier to gift you some of my power." I got lost in the weight of her words for a moment. Then I remembered. "I brought one of my great-grandfather's books," I said, pulling the huge tome from my satchel. Lumbrissa crouched down like a child, her legs tucked under her, elbows resting on the grass, her chin in her hands. Her enormous face was smiling slightly, her luminous green, gold-flecked eyes almost level with mine. She knew how imposing she was to small beings, but she tried to make herself small by crouching down. At that moment, I understood that it took a great deal of effort for her to maintain human size for long periods. It would be like being squeezed into a box. I spent several minutes showing her the work of Samaxius and his designs for the manipulation of the forces of magic. Lumbrissa absorbed the information and even asked to touch the thick sheets of parchment. She told me she could detect something strange on them. There must have been more dantium in the ink. She examined the book thoroughly, occasionally closing her eyes while touching one of them, as if channeling some secret message. When we arrived at the last page, she said, "There is great power in this mordantium substance. I should like to have some for myself." The way she looked at me when she said it meant it was not a request. I stowed the book back into my satchel. Lumbrissa reached into her long hair at her temple, just behind her ear. She extended her hand and showed me a small, luminescent creature that looked somewhat like a flower, but the petals waved back and forth in the air as if it could be swimming. It levitated just above her palm, making little chirping sounds. She said, "This little one does not belong here. It came through the portal your great-grandfather created. It is here through no fault of its own, but left uncared for, it would die, or worse, take over the island. When you open the portal, we should send it back." She hid the little glowing creature back in the long curtains of her hair, just behind her ear. "Now, close your eyes and hold still," she said. Slowly she extended one finger and lightly touched my forehead. A surge of her life force flowed into me. It was like drinking a bottle of Frogfoot's strongest brew in one gulp. I shuddered and stumbled back. For a moment I felt mild heat where Lumbrissa had touched my forehead. My skin tingled. My mage sight caught the details of the smallest currents of energy, and the threads that connect all life on the island were visible. A web of light surrounded everything. The swirls of life force energy were brighter, more vivid than I had ever experienced. Everything seemed alive, even the stone. The wind sounded different, as if the air vibrated to song. I could see the threads of life force connecting everything to everything. I thought that this was how Lumbrissa saw the world all the time. When I looked into the sky, I could see the currents of magic flowing from the island. They seemed to be drifting out of the volcanoes. The clouds left trails as they floated by. If I listened carefully, I could hear the forest speaking, but could not make out the words. I asked Lumbrissa what the plants were saying, but Lumbrissa's answer was cryptic. She just smiled and said, "When you ascend, you will understand the speech of the world. Now go. There is work to be done." I rubbed my forehead, remembering why I came, then turned and left the talking trees behind and headed for the tower. Even with my mastery of mage sight, I could not hold back the churning, swirling patterns of light now clouding my vision. It was a side effect of containing Lumbrissa's life force. Everything was illuminated. Every blade of grass was a forest, each stone a mountain under an infinite sky. Looking up gave me vertigo. I felt as if I could see infinity. I was living on a different time scale. Overwhelmed by my extended senses, it took me hours to find the tower. When I did arrive, it was glowing in the golden light of the setting sun. The gathering clouds were turning pink and violet. Out over the water, I could clearly see the struggling remnant of the portal slowly spiraling. Entering the tower, the corridors felt confining in a way they hadn't before. The closeness was stifling. I put my hands on the array and channeled my will, my desire to see Samaxius, my ambitions, and my hopes into the runes. The beacon lit up so bright I could see it clearly through my closed eyes. The portal expanded and iridescent swirls of ether poured through. I stood at the balcony railing on the topmost floor of the lighthouse, watching the portal for any sign of the wandering star. Hours went by. I started to feel foolish for thinking that Samaxius might still be alive, against all odds. He would be over 100 years old by now, but powerful mages were known to live exceptionally long lives. The sun had set hours ago. A hard rain began falling, announcing the start of a huge storm. The night was far from dark. The Aether Gate formed into a perfect circle of iridescent energy, rimmed by powerful lightning bolts that singed the air and sea. Steam and fog rose, making the night air thick. The smell of the ether was like warm desert air. I could make out the form of Lumbrissa swimming beneath the waves, a long graceful shadow keeping vigil. In the small hours of the night, the lightning abruptly ceased, and for the moment, all was quiet. Through the colorful clouds, part of a ship emerged. The narrow, sleek prow poking through slowly, and the name now clearly visible, Wandering Star. I knew it from the models Samaxius had left in his workshop. Halfway through the portal, the ship lit up like the sun, throwing a warm yellow-orange light for miles. The Mordantium was announcing its arrival, its power barely contained. I could make out the traces of enchantments designed to hide it, but they were not strong enough to hold back the potent magic streaming out of it. A concentration that dense radiated power. Mordantium was raw potential, and Samaxius had just brought through enough to run Stormkill for 100 years. The mordantium deposit in the hold shone so bright, it made the ship look like a paper lantern. The decks and planking were visible like the shadows of a skeleton. Shadowy figures clung to the deck. It was Samaxius and the crew. They were not alone. Something huge was following the ship. Massive translucent tentacles reached out of the ether and began wrapping themselves around the wandering star. Was the monster attempting to come through? Was it after the mordantium? Was it hunting Samaxius? High atop the lighthouse, I could only watch. One of the sails of the ship began to tear away as the creature began to pull the ship back into the ether. That concludes this episode of The Riddle of Samaxius. Tune in next time to find out what happened with Samaxius and the Wandering Star. Tell me if you like the long stories or not, and remember that everything I create is from my own mind and my own hands. No AI is used in the production of this content. It's all organic. If you can spare it, I could use your support. Consider becoming a patron and join my Patreon channel, or simply buy me a coffee. Every little bit helps. See you next time.